Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Welcome. Welcome. I told you yesterday the weather changed. Oh my. But again, you guys back east think we're all very funny over here because tonight's going to be like 22 degrees, and yeah. For us, that's freezing out here in California. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. Welcome to California Haunts Radio. I heard the applause. Thank you. Applause is a good thing. Tonight, we're broadcasting live over Facebook, YouTube, and Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and from our website at californiahauntsradio.com. So we got 4 places we're broadcasting live to. But again, I want to welcome everybody here. We are the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We're 35 strong up and down the state of California. Washington, we have a team, and Nevada, and some people, and we have a small handful of team in Hawaii. We're a nonprofit organization, which is why I have that ticker tape thing going along the bottom, because we have to pay bills like everybody else, and those bills come out of my pocket. So if the computer breaks or something goes wrong or a mic goes down, I have to pay for it. So if you guys could be just so kind as to help me out a little bit to keep this thing on the air and keep us rolling with really good shows, I would really appreciate it. You can do that at paypal.me at California Haunts, or if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, you can do that at Venmo, and then just type in California Haunts, and boom, zowie, there we are. Boom, zowie. I always think of comic books, like superhero comic books. Boom, zap, zow, like the old Batman show. Anyway, we have a great guest tonight. He's come back. The first time he was on, there was technical difficulties beyond our control. So hopefully tonight's a little better. But he and I got into a really hot conversation about shapeshifters, like vampires and stuff. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun ride tonight. Okay? I want to let you guys know that tonight, I promised you guys I was going to do it last night, but I was busy updating the website. We are going to be doing ghost tours again. Well, I heard you guys. I heard that cheer. What's a ghost tour? Ghost tours are not like anything you would go on with just a tour group. No. We've got all this high-tech equipment that we use when we're out in the field. So when we take you on a ghost tour, it's usually at one of the old hotels here in the area. We will take you in and you will become instant member of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team. You get to use our equipment. You get to gather your evidence. And we also all get to go over that evidence. And then right after we go over the evidence, if you got any of that evidence, because we always post the stuff on the website, you will get your name on the website. Okay? The saying, so-and-so got this EVP, or so-and-so, was having issues with his EMF meter or her EMF meter. That's one of the perks. Plus, it's not over yet. T-shirts. We could either get you a California Haunts Radio T-shirt, which are pretty cool. It's got that logo. See that logo behind me? Head down. There we go. They have that logo on them. Or we have a California Haunts Ghost Hunting Academy T-shirt. That's pretty cool. So you'll also get a T-shirt for participating. So like I said, check us out probably around midnight Pacific tonight, and I should have everything updated. I don't know where we're going to go hunting yet, but I'll have everything else on there, information for you guys. Okay? Anyway, now we can get down to business. We're going to get John up right now. My mouth is like, okay. I just had a big bowl of oatmeal, heart-healthy oatmeal, but it feels good. It felt good today because it's cold. Because I worked out front today. Anyway, so I'm going to get John up, and we can get going on this, and hopefully we don't have the same issues we had last time. Bye. Okay, here we go. I said bye. Listen to that. I'm losing it. Hello.
Hello, Charlotte.
Hey, it's looking better this time, so you haven't stopped moving yet. This is a good sign.
You're right. That's right. So far, so good.
Thank you for coming back after the last time.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay. You and I had a great conversation about vampires and stuff, and I want to get into that again because everybody liked it. In fact, a lot of people came to me and said, you know what? All that shape-shifting stuff was creepy. And I said, okay, good. I'll have him back then.
Okay.
So tell everybody about yourself. Boom.
I was born in Well,
born in Poor, Alabama, and yeah, okay.
yeah, exactly. I went to grammar school. No, I mean, the short of it is that I'm a writer first of fiction and nonfiction. You know, a lot of different books. Well, actually, six ghost books, five ghost books that are nonfiction, a ghost novel,
Hmm.
a paranormal novel, and I'm working on actually a paranormal novel now as I'm speaking. Um, so I'm a writer first and sort of a paranormal investigator second. But I've been doing this now. Let's see. Well, my first book was in 2004,
Hmm.
so it's been quite some time that I've been doing this, and I've investigated paranormal locations all across the United States and in several countries abroad as well. Working with various teams, people like you.
Hmm.
I get invited by various teams to say, hey, we're doing an investigation at a haunted house in LA. Do you want to join us? I'll say, yeah, sure. So I go along, and when I'm on these investigations, I try to act primarily as a journalist. So I go in being as objective as
Can I
possible.
get my finger in the right spot? Okay, there we go.
You
See,
know?
I'm just doing it because I'm a journalist. So I'm like, yeah, okay,
Okay, yeah, for journalism, yeah.
yeah, for journalism,
Two thumbs for journalism.
yeah.
So, yeah. Well, for many years I taught at Ohio University. In fact, I'm still on their faculty in creative writing. And they have an excellent school of journalism there,
Cool.
Scripps School of Journalism, one of the best in the country, actually. So, anyway, and I was a journalist at Cincinnati Enquirer for a while too. So, and magazines. So I've done virtually every kind of writing that you could imagine. I've done it, over the years. I do writers conferences. I do paranormal conferences. I speak at
Nice.
universities, libraries, shows like yours. So
Cool.
so that's me in a nutshell.
So we're lucky to have you tonight. Then this is great. Let's talk about shapeshifters. People are creeped out about shapeshifters. What makes people get so many willies over that?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for one thing is because you never know what you're looking at, right? I
Right.
mean, if you're talking about, some of the old classic horror movies like The Mummy or something, well, you know what a mummy looks like when it comes at you with his bandages wrapped up, you know what he is, or a zombie, you know what that is. But if a shapeshifter is something that is unidentifiable simply because at any one time it could be anything, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's part of the scary part of it. Also, I think part of the allure of the shapeshifter character is that it can be anything. In a lot of ways, it gives into sort of some wish fulfillment that we may have inside ourselves to be something better, something stronger, something magical, something with more power, to be a superhero, whatever you want to say. So shapeshifters, I think, are popular because of that reason. They appeal to us in a very human way. I
Hmm.
don't find a lot of connections with a zombie.
Right.
I mean, I'm alive. I'm alive. you know, so I don't see that, but I can understand a shapeshifter. I can understand humans transforming or wanting to
Hmm.
transform to something else, or as in a lot of the old fairy tales and folk legends, being cursed and
Hmm.
and being changed to something else against their will involuntarily.
So when we talk about shapeshifters, like you say in folklore, we're talking people like Count Dracula, maybe werewolves, things like that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's some of the stereotypical shapeshifters that we think of today. Werewolves probably number one, you
Hmm.
know, and there's so much in terms of werewolf stories and in popular culture, novels, movies, you name it. So I think when people think of a shapeshifter today, they think primarily of a werewolf.
Hmm.
Uh, Vampires, yeah, also to some extent, although that idea of a vampire as a shapeshifter didn't really start until Bram Stoker wrote Dracula toward the end of the 19th century. Um, Prior to that, vampires were more like um, more like zombies in the sense that they were alive. They were dead, but they were alive, feeding
Right.
on basically the life substance, the life force. That wasn't necessarily blood. It was sort
Hmm.
of ambiguous as to what it was, but it was the life force of human beings. But they weren't shapeshifters.
Hmm.
And then Bram Stoker in his novel has a couple of scenes where it's clear that Count Dracula shapeshifts at one point into a bat where he's
Right.
banging against the window trying to get in. And another point, Jonathan Harker, who is the main character in there, one of the main characters, as he's looking out the window of Dracula's castle, he sees Dracula crawling down the wall of the
Oh,
castle.
that's right. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, head first like a squirrel or something. Just so what was he doing? What had he transformed into to do that?
Right.
And after that, I think the novel was very successful, and I think that idea of a shape shifting vampire sort of just became almost the status of all vampire stories after that. They almost every one of them became some kind of a shapeshifter, and mostly a bat, mainly because that's what Stoker said at the beginning.
What I find interesting about the shapeshifter in history is that it's not only one culture that talks about them. I mean, it goes way back with the Native Americans, even.
Oh, it goes back much further than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as here, with the Native Americans we have, there's stories of them, but I know they go much further, much farther back. What do you think is the first? I don't know if you know this. One of the earliest accounts of a shapeshifter.
Well, we don't have historical record or anything written down, but there's a cave in France called Trois Frères, the three brothers. My French is not very good, but that's supposed to say three brothers in French.
There we go. Sorry,
and
guys.
there's there on the wall there's a cave painting, and it's in my book. I have the drawing of it, and my book Shapeshifters: A History. It appears there, and this cave painting literally shows what looks like a deer, but it's standing up on its hind legs. And instead of hooves, as you would expect on the deer, it looks like it has fingers and toes. Now we know deers don't have that, right? So what's that about? And then if you look at the face, the eyes of the deer are like ours. They're center forward instead of to the side like they are in a real deer. So what anthropologists believe this shows is they believe it shows the transformation of a shaman into a deer. Mm-hmm. Now, what's that about? Did it really happen? Well, what they think is that it was probably what they call hunter magic, in which a shaman would get together, the hunters of the tribe would get together sitting in the cave, and the shaman would say, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to get deer. So he would draw this image of a deer on the cave, and then probably the hunters would probably take some hallucinogenics.
Yeah.
I mean, in South America, ayahuasca or something, or maybe magic mushrooms, whatever, but something to put them in a different state, a different mental state. And the shaman would be chanting and singing or whatever he would do to get the hunters to think that, okay, we are now changing, we're transforming into deer or whatever the prey was. Mm-hmm. Of course, the idea is if you are a deer, how you can get right up to the herd, right? It'd be very easy to hunt one. So that was the whole idea behind that. Do they really change into deer? Well, probably not, but that's almost inconsequential. It doesn't really matter because the idea was that they thought they had, and they believed they had.
I had a case out in Rockland, and it was on old Native American land. I'm trying to adjust this so I can see. Oh, there I am. So I can read the comments too. I'm blind. It's okay. But this particular case, she was in her spa, and she happened to look over the fence, and she saw a Native American dressed in what she thought was deer skin, and he had antlers on his head. And as you're talking about this ritual that they have with peyote or whatever the heck, and I don't want to insult any Native Americans. Don't get the wrong idea. I have a lot of respect for that, for that culture. But maybe, like you say, that's what was happening. Is one of the medicine men would dress up as this, in all this deer skin and everything, and then once everybody had their happy cigarette, this is what happened, and that's what. Oh my God, it's a deer,
mm-hmm.
Shapeshifted. Right. I find this very fascinating because there's so many reports. Like you say, it's not just Native American culture; it's all over the world. It doesn't matter where you go. Right. And they've taken it, and what I find interesting too is they've taken it into modern stuff. You have the Twilight, you have Star Trek. When Kirk was involved with I think the actress Iman was the actress, and she played a shapeshifter in there. And now I forget. I think yeah, I think they were on that planet where they were in prison, the Klingon planet. And she appeared real beautiful, and then he kissed her, and then she turned into this other thing, and all this and what's on. So you see that stuff. Yeah, you see that stuff all the time, even in modern times. And see, Athena says, also wearing bearskin and head. Yes, they do. And then you got skinwalkers. Is a skinwalker a shapeshifter or no? Or do you think?
Yeah,
Nobody really knows.
yeah. I mean, that's part of their whole deal is that they are shapeshifters, and they're pretty tough characters. I mean, they're not what you'd call nice people, I guess,
Right.
is a way to look at it. And if you invoke if you invoke a skinwalker, you're doing it for a reason that is probably to get back at somebody, to cause damage, to cause harm, maybe to kill somebody. And the skinwalkers will, they do that, and they typical transformation sometimes into like a coyote or a wolf or something along those lines. And the Native American nations that do have that belief in skinwalkers are deadly serious about it, and don't even like to talk about it. They think even so much as talking about skinwalkers could bring them down on them. So they try to avoid that.
Well, you gotta give credit and credence to their beliefs, because I'm off to the side here. I mean, these people, this is the same people that have believed in Sasquatch as well, and I mean, it's not only them seeing the Sasquatch. I mean, it's truckers, it's everybody, just like with the skinwalkers. There's guys that are out trucking at night, late at night, and they'll see these things on the side of the road as they pass by, and there's a lot of reports like that. So there has to be something to it.
Well, people are definitely experiencing, phenomena that they're calling shapeshifters, whether it's among, Native American nations, or whether it's in Europe or wherever it might be. There's accounts all around the world of people having encounters with shapeshifters. So, yeah, I always say, well, to your point, there's enough cases and enough, I don't want to call it evidence, but there's at least enough anecdotal incidents that you think, well, what are people experiencing? What is it that they're seeing, and I'm not the kind of person, like I did a lot of ghost hunting and everything else with my books. And I'm not the kind of person that says, well, if something happens in a house, an object moves by itself or something, I don't immediately say, well, it's got to be a ghost. I mean, I'm prone to rule out everything else that I can first. And even then, I'm not sure that I can say, okay, I've ruled out natural phenomena, laws of physics, so I don't know what this thing is or how it happened. Does that still mean that it was a ghost, or does that still mean that it's paranormal, which is something out of the normal? That's all it means.
See, when something moves, when I'm on location or somebody reports something moving, my first thought is, I want to go look at the earthquake charts.
Yeah.
See what the seismic activity was that day.
I have a great story. So I was visiting California at one point many years ago, and I was in my hotel room. I even forgot what I was out there for, but it doesn't matter. And I'm in there, and as I'm in there, I hear like something rattling, not loudly, but just like a continual rattle. And I'm looking around the room going, what is that? And I see it. There was a big, TV monitor on the dresser, and it was shaking a little bit. And I said, well, what is that about? And I went over to it, and there was a table lamp next to it on the table. And this monitor was shaking a little bit. And all of a sudden, the lamp literally did boom, boom, boom. I mean, it hopped like 3 times across the dresser. And I'm not a California boy. I grew up in New England. We don't have
you don't have stuff doing that. No.
Well, and the thing was, I mean, it turned out that, it was an earthquake, a minor earthquake, but nothing else in the room. And you probably know this, that's news to me, but nothing else was moving. It's just that these 2 objects felt the vibrations, but nothing else did. I didn't feel it.
Yes. I got a story about that. My neighbor's on the fault line. My neighbor off my neighbor off to the south is on the fault line. Anytime there's like I felt a couple here in recent years, but like in past years, the real big earthquakes, because they used to have beads hanging in their windows. They were old timey neighbors. And she would run over and go, "Didn't you feel it?" And we'd be like, "Feel what?" She says, "My beads were going like this."
Right. Right.
But it's weird. That's how earthquakes hit. It's
Yeah.
really strange.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is my point. If I were in a haunted location, supposedly
Right.
haunted location, and I saw that, I might say, somebody might say, "Oh, well, that was a ghost." Well, if it was a haunted location in California, maybe it wasn't. So,
Yeah.
so you have to take all that into account.
Right. Right.
So, I mean,
Athena,
the same thing with with the shapeshifter sightings.
absolutely. Athena says we had Wendigo.
Wendigo. Yeah.
Wendigo and yeah, Wendigo. I'm sorry, guys. I told you I can't see. Yeah, in Nova Scotia where she lived.
Yeah. Yeah. And Wendigo too. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have them in the upper Midwest, like Minnesota, Wisconsin, those areas primarily, and they too are shapeshifters. They're not unlike skinwalkers in the
Right.
sense of being malicious, malevolent.
So are they always, like you say, are they generally violent, or are they just they're just kind of like the Men in Black or whatever, or maybe the shadow people just kind of staring at people?
Well, I think I think the skinwalkers, for instance, they are shamans. They're bruja. They say they're witches. Is what they are.
Right.
And so I wouldn't. Well, is there one around? I want to make sure there's not one in my room here as I'm talking about it. Looking over my shoulder.
That'd be cool. Come on screen if you're there. Just come on screen and show us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've got.
John.
I'm actually sitting in front of my Native American collection. All these books are Native American writers. So
I'll let you know. I think everybody will let you know if one pops up behind you.
Yeah. So, I mean, are they evil? Well, I would say probably, yeah. The Wendigo is a little bit different because in many cultures, I don't know about all of them, but many Native American nations or First Nations up in Canada, the Wendigo is actually a spirit. The skinwalker is not a spirit; it's an actual shaman. It's a shapeshifter. It's a human that shifts.
Sure.
Whereas the Wendigo in a lot of cultures is actually a spirit, and frequently it's the spirit of somebody who had committed suicide. And for whatever reason, that somehow makes them an evil, creature. But they shapeshift at that point. So
this, like you say, it goes back. I remember my grandmother, because she was born and raised in Mexico, across the border on her own. She used to have stories about that over in Mexico. Where they had their version of that. And then she used to work on the Indian reservations because that it was like the late 18. Well, I'm not going to say 1800s, but like early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to cut the hair of the Indian, the Native Americans, and she learned stories from them about, from like the Apache tribes and stuff. And so I grew up hearing those, and yeah, it's scary. I used to leave my lights on at night.
Well, they certainly have their stories, but they're so similar. I mean, that's what struck me when I was doing research for the book. Mm-hmm. The first thing that struck me was that there were so many different types of shapeshifters. I had no idea. Right. I mean, there's literally hundreds, if not more. That was the first thing that I found really interesting. The second thing was that I found them in almost every culture around the world, and from a very long time ago up till today. And I love the cover of that book.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it's an engraving. I think it's a German engraving from sometime like in the 1600s or something, and it's supposed to be a werewolf. A major killer kind of werewolf.
That is really cool. So let's talk about the werewolf a little bit, because I mean, over the years, like even with Dracula, the legends change. In the way the werewolf is. I mean, the whole silver bullet thing and all that. What do you think stands out more about the werewolf from the old days as opposed to how we look at it, like the Twilight werewolf?
I think the older werewolves were more primal, I guess is the way to say it. I think they were more of an animal nature than what you're seeing today. Like you say, some of the TV shows and movies that are out now where werewolves are depicted. I think in a lot of cases they seem to be more. There's a lot more focus, I think, on their humanity rather than their bestial nature, their animal nature, which I think was more prevalent in some of the older legends and folk tales and things like that.
Right.
But I mean, that's an opinion, you know.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think things kind of took a curve when Michael, Landon became the teenage werewolf, and then Michael J. Fox became the teenage werewolf.
Right.
Everything started going to a more nicer thing because I don't know, maybe it was society, didn't want that horrible image of werewolf. Well, look at Twilight. I mean, the werewolves didn't kill people; they killed the vampires.
Yeah. Right. They're vampire hunters. Yeah. Right. And actually, the same things happened with vampires too. I mentioned Bram Stoker,
Right.
but prior to him, vampires were just very. They were weird. When you read descriptions of people saying they saw vampires or opened up a grave and found a vampire, they were always they were bloated. The corpse was bloated and actually ruddy, kind of like red, looking very healthy, very vibrant, instead of like Count Dracula is white pale. And even going before him, if you think of the Nosferatu movie.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that movie. And I mean, you think of Count Orlok. He was white and pale and long fingernails. I mean, so we've evolved because now the vampires they're rich, they're sexy, they're glamorous, they're intelligent, they're all kinds of wonderful things. It's nice to be a vampire today.
Let's see. Yeah, Athena says werewolves were always very nasty. Yes, they were.
Oh yeah, yeah,
very nasty. I grew up on those movies. I grew up. I mean, my sister. I won't say how old she is, but I was 11 years younger than my sister, and so every weekend was Bob Wilkins. And he had his horror movies on every weekend, and so they'd make me a big bowl of popcorn and sit me down with some ice water, and that's what I would do. And my mom and dad would come home and be petrified because I was only like 3 and 4 and 5 years old watching these movies.
And here you are today.
And my father had a real wicked sense of humor too, because we actually went to Hungary for a month, and we were staying about 5 miles away from what would have been the original border of Transylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And so his wicked thing was, plus he had false teeth, so that didn't help it. His wicked thing was that, okay, we're in this room, you better watch out because we're only so many miles from Transylvania, and I'm going to turn into a vampire. Then he would proceed to open his mouth.
Right.
Of course, I'm like, this is like 12 years old. I'm still like, going through this stuff. He gave me complexes as a kid.
Well,
but he thought it was tremendously funny.
When I did research for this book, I was in Romania, and I was in Transylvania, and I visited all the locations that were supposed to be familiar to the Dracula novel.
Right.
And it's really interesting in Transylvania, especially because the people have different views about the whole Dracula thing. Half the population thinks, oh yeah, it's great. It's great for tourism. Brings in money. Everybody comes to see all the Dracula sites, where he was born, where he died, and all this stuff. But then other people, the other half, say, they don't want anything to do with it. It's it's garbage. It's not who they are. It's not indicative of the Romanian people or the Transylvania. Actually in Transylvania, a lot of the population there is actually Hungarian.
Right. Right.
So anyway, but a lot of them say, yeah, well, especially the Hungarian population, because Dracula is possibly based on a real life prince of Wallachia, Prince Vlad.
Right.
And Vlad was no friend to the Hungarians, or a lot of other people for that matter. So Romanians I should say Hungarian, let's say, how do I say this? People living in Transylvania of Hungarian descent are really not that happy with the whole Dracula stuff.
Well, plus when you look at the Bela Lugosi movies, because he didn't speak any English until much later.
Right.
When you look at the different stuff in there, I mean, they were fairly accurate, because when being Hungarian, and I can't speak the language, the words are like 18 letters long, guys. It's not going to happen. But there's stuff that I did recognize, the smaller words, like in the movie, like the stores and their, where they call it a bolt, and and the and little cat and the little pub thing. So it was interesting to see how much Hungarian stuff they actually did, put into the movies. And I don't know if that's because they were trying to stick more with the folklore of the area, or whether it was for Lugosi so that he could maneuver around the set to be able to, do his thing.
I stayed in one of the places I stayed in this hotel in Cluj in Romania, just outside. And they maintain that that hotel was the hotel that Stoker wrote about, that Jonathan Harker supposedly stayed in when he was going to, Count Dracula's castle.
Right.
He used a different name, but it's gotten to the point where this hotel now has a Jonathan Harker room,
Wow.
that they have it outfitted sort of Victorian style, and on their menu they have a Jonathan Harker something, and there was something that Jonathan Harker ordered in the restaurant when he ate there. They even said, Stoker said what he ate, and that's actually on the menu at the hotel. So they're, again, they're cashing in on the tourism part of it.
Right. And like you say, I agree with you. It's about who you talk to too, because I mean, I know when we were there, my dad, they would laugh about our stories of Dracula, because their stories of Dracula, of course, were Vlad the Impaler, heads up on the sticks and all that going on. Where ours was like, well, where's the guy in the cape flying around, and so it just depends who you talk to and where you go on
That's
these
for
things.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Now, some of the old vampire legends as well. Now, I'm a big TV buff, obviously. You see these graves that people like over in maybe South America would bury their dead, but they would also put steel bars over the graves, or steel bars in the casket so they couldn't rise from the dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been found a lot of places in the world. In England, they found sort of iron cages,
Sure.
actually in the ground over it. Even right here in America, back in, let's see, it would have been late 1800s, 1880s or so. There was basically a vampire panic in New England, and it had to do with a woman named Mercy Brown, a family in Rhode Island. I'll get to their story, but as a result of what they thought happened there, people were thinking that they were seeing vampires everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they were doing is they were digging up bodies and making sure, cutting off heads and staking them, totally desecrating human remains. But they also, when somebody died, now they were burying them under 6 or 7 feet of concrete. They'd lay the craft down and just pour all this cement on them, trying to keep them down. But the Mercy Brown thing was really very weird. Like I said, it was a family. I think she was actually in Exeter, Rhode Island. I have to check that out. I think that's where they lived. But it's a true story, and I don't have the exact year, 1870, 1880, something like that. But the long and short of it is that Mercy Brown's mother passed away from some wasting away disease. She
Mm-hmm.
died from that. And then I think she had a sister that died from that. And her brother became very ill, and was so ill that the doctors said, you need to go west, clear out your lungs in the nice fresh air, as if Rhode Island in the 1800s was some industrial pit. It wasn't. But anyway, so the brother goes out west. I think he went to Colorado, and he was there for a while. Meanwhile, Mercy Brown is home, and she's about, I think, 18 now. And she passes away from this same sort of wasting disease. The brother is no better in Colorado. So the family, the father is left, and whatever they say, well, let's bring him back. So he comes back to Rhode Island, and he's taking a turn for the worse. So I still know how this happens, but somehow the family that's left and the people of the town think that, well, Mercy Brown is a vampire and she's dead, but she's the one that's now preying on her brother, and she somehow caused the death of all these other people even before she died. So this is a horrible, it's a true story though. Was reported in the Providence Journal, which is the newspaper that's still in Providence, Rhode Island, and there was a reporter there. They went to Mercy Brown's grave, and they opened it up, and they cut out her heart, and they burned it. And it was just ashes. And they took the ashes and they mixed them in a potion of some kind that they gave the brother. Made him drink it, thinking this is going to cure him. Well, he died. But this thing caused such a panic. And the odd thing is that tuberculosis had been known by name. People knew what tuberculosis was at that time. And yet they still chose this, and it's spread throughout New England, where people are thinking there's this rash of vampirism. And yet they knew about tuberculosis. They knew that was a wasting disease that would gradually, they called it consumption, but they knew what it was. They knew it was a disease. They knew it wasn't caused by vampires, and yet they chose to believe that vampires were behind this. And so, like I said, you have all these graves being opened up. And it just makes me wonder how it is that you can convince a whole lot of people of something that, despite all the facts and truth and evidence that you lay before them, they say, yeah, no, but we're going with vampires. I mean,
It is
it's
crazy.
not with our political situation today, too. You know?
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
that's something. Yeah, okay.
well,
What happened in recent history here? Okay, so yeah,
yeah, I mean, but but I guess the point is this happens, right?
yeah,
People
yeah.
can be convinced of something despite all evidence to the contrary.
The other thing I was thinking about too is I think some like in South America, some of these stories got started because the old days when people would go into comas and nobody really knew what a coma was,
Right.
and some would be buried alive. So they go
Yeah.
to move the body or something. Oh, they would open up the grave, open up the casket, and there would be scratch marks on the inside. So
Right.
that probably
Yeah.
led to a lot of this too. I mean, that's what led to the Victorian age here in the United States of them putting bells, on graves for the first month or so they could hear them. But I think that probably, I mean, if you were, I'm not going to say really highly educated or whatever, and you went to move your mother or you went to move your brother and you opened the thing up to move him and then you found all these scratches on the inside, it might lead you to think that maybe he had become a vampire or something along that line.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you say, well, they're trying to get out, they're alive, but
Mm-hmm.
that thing about the bells. So, the saying "saved by the bell."
Yeah.
That's exactly what it means. Is that, and if your audience doesn't know it, there was a contraption that was basically a string that was in the coffin, and it was funneled up through a tube up to the surface of the ground where there was a bell. So the idea is, if you came to in your casket, you just pull the string and the bell outside will be ringing and somebody's going to come dig you up. Well, okay, if somebody is standing by the bell 24/7,
Yeah.
you might. I live in Ohio. I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Ohio became the center for making these inventions uh, to prevent. Well, for one thing, like if somebody came alive, was resurrected in their coffin or came alive in their coffin again, but also to prevent grave robbing, which was big, selling the bodies to medical school. Ohio was the invention of they invented so many, they were the center of these inventions. And one thing they invented was there are two things. One was a bomb that if you opened a grave and stepped down into it, you would blow yourself up.
Oh my.
That was there. And another one was it was a gun. It was like a shotgun that was somehow rigged in the coffin. So if you open the coffin, this shotgun's going to blow off in your face. I mean, I've seen the patents and design. This is
That's crazy.
amazing stuff. But
Amazing. I mean, yeah. Well, it sends out it sends out a good message too. I mean,
yeah,
if you're going to open a
yeah,
grave up, you're going to end up in it. I mean, it's simple.
right. Well, my agent right now is trying to sell a novel that is a historical novel with a little bit of
Torpedo bombs, as Tina says.
a little bit of and the first, it opens up with a guy trying to steal a grave and getting himself blown up. So
That's crazy. That's crazy. But like with the shapeshifters, the history of them. I mean, there's just so many in the world, so many versions of them come that you hear about. You think about what you call it, ranch. Oh, my mind is like Jello. Skinwalker Ranch. You think about that. That's what modern people think about when they think about shapeshifters. That's what they think about. The Skinwalker Ranch, pretty much. But I mean, like I said, there's so many stories. There's a book out called Trucker Ghost Stories, I think is the book.
okay,
And they talk about a lot of this because, like I said, those guys are out on the roads late at night, and they're out in these rural areas, maybe on an Indian reservation in the middle of nowhere somewhere in the desert, and they'll come across these things.
yeah.
They'll see.
Well, I say that's where a lot of the stories you hear from skinwalkers are, or truckers, or just people driving out in these long desert roads, middle of the night, and look out your window and there's this animal keeping pace with your car, and you're doing 80,
Yeah.
and he's right beside you,
Yeah.
and then disappearing just off into the woods or off into the desert or something.
Now, I've always wondered because like when you hook in, I mean, as a journalist, of course, we're looking at the reality of what could be going on with stuff. But as you keep reading this stuff, it always made me wonder, even with the Sasquatch, that because people always think it's an offshoot of us, But the aliens for years allegedly have been taking us to do experiments. They take our DNA. They're trying to build a better. They're trying to build a better person or whatever. I always wonder if these things might not be accidents. Where they have tried to create stuff and it hasn't
Oh.
quite come out the way they plan, and then they just send it back.
Or one gets out of the lab
Or
and
one gets out of the lab, yeah.
runs out. Who knows? I think a lot of the cryptids that people talk about, like Sasquatch and Nessie and some of these other ones, to me it just seems like, I think it's very possible that these are just some type of animal species or something that has been, able to remain hidden for
hmm
who knows how long. And now, as the wild lands of the earth are shrinking and human population's increasing, we're starting to come across them. I don't necessarily think they're anything like aliens or anything. I just
Right,
think there's something unknown that we haven't, met
right,
before.
right, right. So who knows?
Yeah.
There's a legend up here, right? Not by close to where I live, but I would think maybe Marisa can correct me on this. About 30 miles away or so, and in Napa called rebobs. And I had never heard of them before until I saw them on some
No,
TV program. And I don't know if you heard of them, but
no.
this was supposed to be a doctor that lived up in the wine country, and he had some kind. They think it was a government contract, and what he was supposedly doing was he was taking monkeys and making them fly, putting wings on these monkeys.
I
And the
saw the
story,
Wizard of Oz.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why, and there's a paranormal group, and I don't know if they're still around, but they used to be called the Flying Monkeys. And supposedly, somewhere along the line they got loose and they're all over up in the hills up there. And there's a lot of people the locals have stories about seeing them at night. I think personally, I think it's owls they're seeing, because they'll say they'll go down this road because the house is still there. There's a big gate, and they'll park their car and they'll look up and they'll see these big red eyes, looking back at them from the trees, you know. Or the other legends are they get chased. And I think that's how this stuff starts. I mean, it just starts as something
Right.
small, and then it goes boom, 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 boom. The next thing you know, hey, yeah, I saw that. It's just like when you go to interview for a paranormal investigation, and you've got a whole family involved. You don't want to interview them all together because each one will build up on the other's sighting.
Right.
You have to interview people alone. And I think that's how that happens, is because so many people talk about this stuff that after a while, the truth gets all twisted.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, that's what folk tales are all about. And
Yeah.
folk legends, there could be some grain of truth in it if you go back far enough, that there was some animal or something that somebody saw, and next thing you know, they said, well, it was 2 feet high, and you tell that to somebody else, and they say it was 3 feet high, and then they return it was 4 feet high. Next thing you know, you've got some 12-foot monster. So yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the difficulty in tracking down the truth is trying to separate legends and hearsay and erroneous reports from what is factual. Again, what is factual.
What scares you the most about shapeshifters?
I think, oddly enough, Charlotte, I don't think it was like a particular shapeshifter as much as just the idea of the sort of desire of some people to become something other than what they were. And what I mean by that is, I was thinking of some people, like some of our serial killers, like somebody like Ted Bundy, for instance, who, when you saw Ted Bundy, was a very clean cut, collegiate looking guy, very friendly, outgoing. He helped people, helped little ladies with their groceries, all this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And yet he was this horrible monster. He was a killer. He was a sadist and a killer. And so there was something inside him that was much different than what you saw on the outside. So I guess in doing all this research, I just started thinking about how that plays out in sort of real life. I mean, we have shapeshifters among us. We have people like that for all appearances seem to be something other than what they really are.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought just thinking about that was, kind of scary. I mean, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Now I know you put a lot of research. You had to put a lot of research and travel into this book. How long did it take you to put the book together?
Well, if you count the research, too. I mean, if you count the traveling as part, well, it was part of the research, I would say probably about a year and a half to do the research, which isn't really all that much. And then maybe another year to write it and finally have it, see it in print. So,
Were people willing to talk to you about this stuff?
yeah, I'm trying to think if there was any case where they weren't. Well, like I said, maybe a little bit again in Transylvania, as I mentioned, there was some people that said, just Dracula back, and wouldn't want to talk about it. Not that they were afraid; they just thought it was a bunch of, crap.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But no, I think for the most part, people were cooperative, and yeah, I think probably because I went in with the attitude that I wasn't trying to. Embarrass them or make fun of them or debunk them or call them liars. I just said, hey, I hear there's stories from this area, this region. What do you know? You know anything about that? And if they say yes, well, can you tell me your story? So, or what you know. So I think going in like that with an open mind and sort of a non-confrontational approach really works. So
I'm just so fascinated that you took this project on because I mean this isn't a small project. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to work on something that's happening here in the U.S., but I mean, this is an all over the world thing.
Yeah, right. And I have to admit that after putting this book together, and I look at it now, and it's almost like I'm just covering just like the surface level at this point, because there's so much. I mean, I could have gone into every one of these countries and really, driven down and delved down deeper into their lore, reports, whatever, and probably have done a book on every country. So there's a lot more that could have been done, but I was just trying to get it out. And so I think I even say it in the beginning of the book that I'm not trying to say this is the be all end all in shapeshifter books, but it's a really broad approach, and I wanted that because I think the term shapeshifter could be used in so many different ways. The monsters that we talked about, the human monsters that I talked about when I mentioned Ted Bundy, as well as just the idea, not even a monster idea, but the idea of sort of delving into who we are and who we want to be, who do we think we are, and the different hats that we wear at different times and that kind of thing. So anyway.
Do you think some of it has to, like you said, the different hats that we wear, do you think some of it has to do with people trying to, I'm talking like old-timey people, because old-timey people didn't have all the medical knowledge that we have, like you were talking about Ted Bundy, do you think this is how people were dealing with people like Bundy? Or like, I mean, even look at the Salem witch trials. All those women got burned at the stake. They really weren't witches, but they got burned because they were doing different things that nobody understood. So sorcery.
Right.
So maybe, way back when, maybe these people had mental issues or whatever, and that's what they did. In order for them to be able to face that reality that these people had issues, this is what they created.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. And I can give you a couple of examples. In the book, in the chapter about werewolves, I talk about 3 or 4 cases, documented cases, of mostly from France. I think there's 1 or 2 from Germany, about people 18th century or so, 1700s, 1600s, maybe even earlier, who actually believed that they were werewolves, and so acted out and killed people, murdered people, and did it as if they were animals, literally tearing people apart with their hands, sometimes eating them. So early on, when these cases happened, when the people were apprehended, these guys were apprehended, and not just guys, actually some were women as well. But when they were apprehended, they were immediately executed, because they were evil. They were, the devil was in them and turned them into werewolves and all this kind of stuff. But by the time you got to the 18th century, like the 1700s, with cases like that, when people were finally arrested, even after committing these horrendous crimes, they were usually committed to an asylum, because they realized at that point, you're a nutcase, you got something wrong with you. So there's that shift, not knowing at first, understanding mental conditions and mental illness, and then over a period of time, 100 years later, a century later, saying, Yeah, that's that's just wrong. And we have the term I was going to say we have lycanthropy. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly right, which simply means thinking that you're a werewolf. So
Well, I think about some of the term, and even now in the modern days, some of these like Richard Trenton Chase, people like that. Right away, the news media will say, "Oh, the vampire. He's a vampire." So
right,
they're still kind of doing that now with these guys too.
right, right. There's there's a whole there's a couple of communities in the U.S. and maybe abroad as well. I don't know, of people who call themselves sanguinarians.
Yep.
Right? And they say that they need to ingest human blood to live. And they have people. I mean, it's amazing. They're not vampires. They don't jump out at you in an alley and bite your neck.
No.
But here's something I don't. I read a little bit about it. I'm hard pressed to find any medical basis for what they claim. But I'm also not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. But they have people who serve as their, I'll call it hosts for better word, and it's a voluntary thing. They sign a contract. And they donate blood very hygienically, as if they were donating blood at a Red Cross center. It's strange, right? But people say, "Oh, these are vampires." Well, no, not really. But they're,
Yeah, it's just whatever they're doing. Excuse me. Did you have nightmares doing this when you wrote this? Honestly, I think I would. I think it would really affect me.
No, not yet. I'll let you know. But,
Did you run into did you run into any negativity? I mean, literally when you went to ask the people, to find out about this stuff, or maybe someone didn't want to part with the information, and they just thought you were totally like stepping on over the line on it.
I ran into some negativity after the book came out. Not so much during research.
Right.
But I particularly, I ran afoul of, okay, let me back up. A lot of different magazines and journals reviewed my book.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them that reviewed it was a Catholic journal, a Catholic magazine, which I have to say surprised the heck out of me. Why they would have chosen to review my book, I don't know. But they took some issue with some of the things that I said about the Bible and about shapeshifters in the Bible. Because I go into that a little bit, because there does seem to be some, depending on how you look, no one knows, interpreting the Bible is very difficult, but there are some passages in some areas where it looks like, there could be some vampires there or shapeshifting.
Right.
And they took exception to it, especially when I asked the question, could Jesus have been a shapeshifter? They didn't like that.
Oh, I'm sure that went over well. Yeah.
They didn't like that. But my theory was, if you are a Christian and you believe in Jesus and you believe that all he can do, walk on water, raise the dead, cure the blind, the lame, shapeshifting would be a parlor trick for him. That wouldn't be that hard to do.
Sure.
So what's your beef? But anyway, so I got a little negativity from that quarter of the world.
I can understand that though, because I'm not going to do it on the air because I'm Catholic, but there are, there's double speak.
Yeah,
about ghosting and everything else. About ghosts and everything else. There is a double speak, and people don't realize it, but there is. So I can see them, having issues with what you're doing. I understand.
Me too. I was raised a Catholic. I mean, I get it.
How do you think? Okay, like we talked about earlier, the difference in how people feel about that stuff now, as opposed to then. Now, Tim, in my opinion, I mean, people now embrace it. I mean, it's like a game, and I think it's because the media and movies and stuff have changed what the original intention was when people were seeing these things. Like you say, now they look like movie stars.
Yeah, right. Well,
vegetarians, they drink the blood of animals, blah blah blah.
Right. Well, there's this whole industry, this cosplay industry, right, where people, dress up as superheroes and Star Trek characters and Lord of the Rings and all this kind of stuff, and that's just it's become very popular as part of the culture. And yes, the people, as you say, they've embraced it, I think, in a lot of ways. Not just shapeshifters, but almost anything that is mythological or
Mm-hmm.
fantastical, or
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm. The evolution on the shapeshifters, this stuff that goes back to ancient times. I mean, look at the Greek, look at Greek mythology,
Right.
because Zeus could change shapes.
Oh yeah,
He
and
had
he
the ability.
and he did it dozens of times, and always a different form.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it goes back. But the interesting thing is when you go back that far, if you look at Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the shapeshifters then they were all gods.
Mm-hmm.
You know, mortals didn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
and frequently shape shifting occurred because some god would curse somebody and say, okay, you're a tree now or whatever. And it's like, well, what I do,
Yeah.
So he had no power. But by the time, as we evolved and they got, and sort of these old gods of mythological origins kind of died out and people didn't believe them anymore, there was still that idea about shapeshifting, and it sort of devolved to humans in the sense of people who were considered to be sorcerers or wizards or shamans or witches, human beings who now are saying, well, now they have the power. So it's kind of interesting how it went from the gods, a special power reserved for the gods, to now humans, but
Mm-hmm.
humans of a little special nature than your
Right.
average, next door neighbor.
And I was just thinking as you said that too, old timey medicine, like who knows way back, way back, way back because of rabies. The whole thing with the werewolf biting the man so they could create another werewolf. I mean, that could have come from somebody that had been bit by a dog that had rabies, and then people watched the transformation, and that's how that'll come out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. There's diseases that mimic a lot of what people think these monsters became. And yeah, and again, as we were lacking that knowledge, we didn't know what to attribute it to. So it must have been something weird or mythological or along those lines.
So fascinating, though. I wish I could get into writing a book like that. Right now I'm just trying to produce my 2 books and get them out, and maybe I can start looking into stuff like that because that's just, to me, I love doing research. Man, the more research I used to love going to court, because they'd make me do these, have to look through all the files and everything, and I loved every second of it.
Yeah.
And to do what you do, I'm just in awe of you.
Well, the research is a lot of fun, I have to say. I mean, especially, if you're going to do the traveling and everything else, because I always try to get to the locations if I can, and it's not always possible, but
Right.
Right.
Right. But that's part of the fun too. Like you went to Europe and asked people questions about it and all that. I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get there. Who knows? Who
You
knows?
can do it.
What impressed you the most about your research on this book?
Well, as I said, I think again just the depth and breadth of the shape shifting world. I had no idea. I started looking at Japanese culture, and their shapeshifters were entirely different than anything we have here. They're not even close. I mean, here a shapeshifter is a human being that shapeshifts into something else, right? In Japan, most of their shapeshifters they're dead. They're mostly ghosts,
right,
that then come back in other forms to usually seek revenge on somebody or get back at whatever. But so I guess just the complexity of the whole shapeshifter culture. I really was just, I sat there and said, holy cow, how do I write this? This was it was impressive, but it was overwhelming as well.
Well, let's talk about Japan for a minute because people don't. I've seen Japan horror movies, and they're scary.
Yeah,
they really have some scary stuff over there.
Yeah, they do some good movies.
And I know it's like when you go to Europe or you're in France, and my dad noticed this on the TV. What they're allowed to show on TV and stuff, and in the movies over there, is completely different from what our censors are allowing over here. Right. So when you get a hold of a non-censored Japanese horror movie, you're going to get the pants scared off you from those legends. But they really have some scary, legends.
Yeah, and they're mostly all ghost stories for the most part, if you think about it. Like I'm trying to think of like a Japanese werewolf, for instance, or were creature of some kind, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't come up with that. I do know there are shape-shifting Japanese forms. Like there's a fox called a kitsune. There's I forgot some of the other ones already, but they're not the same thing as werewolves or that kind of sort of ferocity. But
Mm-hmm.
they have a fantastic range of weird creatures that are shapeshifters. They're not all ghosts, like I said, but there's some that are just there's like something called a kappa, which is it's like a frog. It's like a frog, and it has kind of a flat head with sort of like an indentation in the head, and there always has to be water sitting in that indentation, like a little lake on top of his head.
Huh.
If ever that spills out, he loses all his abilities. But these things, they look like harmless little frogs. Oh, they're so cute. And apparently, they do a lot of good things for Japanese people. They play tricks and do good things for them. Then they
Right.
also kill them and eat them too. So you got that.
Right. Right. And like again, going back through history, I mean, like you think about Merlin and King Arthur and stuff, shape shifting. He
Right.
taught King Arthur to shapeshift into a fish and into an eagle to see to check out the kingdoms and all this. I mean, it just there's so much of it in history,
Yeah.
going way back, even medieval times. So I just think it's a fascinating topic. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I know a lot of people around me are terrified. It's scary for people because they have that ability to 1 minute you're talking to someone, so the next minute they're growing fangs and and whatever else they're
Right.
doing. You
Right.
know.
Well, and I have to say too that not. I mean, my research showed that not every shapeshifter is an evil being. I
Okay.
mean, that's not true at all. There's a lot of them
Let's talk about
that
that.
yeah, a lot of them that do good things. Whatever. Um, I mean, in Italy, there's shapeshifting fairies that bring favors to people and do things for them. So I mean, it's not all gloom and doom.
Yeah, that was gonna be my other question was that we sat here tonight and we've talked about all this gloom and doom, but like you say, there are the flip side of that to where there's good ones.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's some like the one I mentioned in Japan that it's weird. They will do good things for some people, and other people they'll treat horribly. So it's not even like in a sense they're even shape shifting in their own behavior.
Right,
So
right, right, right,
yeah.
right. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm working now on a sort of paranormal. Well, it's a paranormal fantasy sort of trilogy, 3 novels that takes place in 18th century England. Working on that while my agent is still trying to sell a couple of other paranormal books, novels. So all fiction. I'm working in fiction these days, pretty much more than anything.
That's cool. That's cool. And here's one of my favorite questions. I don't know if I asked you this last time or not because we were having all that issue.
Yeah.
You're standing on a street in Las Vegas on the Strip, and there's a couple more guys that have books similar to what you wrote on shapeshifting.
Hmm.
How do you get people to read your book?
I steal the other guy's books. So,
Set them on fire in the middle of the Strip.
so I'm the only one left. Um, well, that's a good question, and I think I hate to sound like okay, well I'm bragging because first of all I'm not sure I found any other books just on shapeshifters. That was
Okay.
the one thing, but I think also I think that because I expand the definition of shapeshifter so much and talking to not just what we know about shapeshifters as pop culture or in mythology, but I also go into the psychology a lot about why people are enamored of shapeshifters and what shapeshifting might mean for us as humans. I just think it's a much broader treatment of a shapeshifter. And that's how I would sell it. I think that, I think the other books would probably just be, yes, there's vampires and there's werewolves and, because it took a lot of time and effort to get all this stuff out.
Absolutely. I can see that. I can understand that. Tons and tons of research. And like I said, I really admire you for doing it. John, thank you. We had a great interview today.
Thank you, Charlotte.
No technical difficulties.
Perfect.
Lots of people in the chat room commenting. And wow,
Good.
that's all I can say. I would love to get you on again when you get your news, your new books out. Because I know you
Yeah.
have other books besides this.
Yeah, well, all my books are, they're all on Amazon. You can get them at your bookstore, hopefully, but if not, they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, And my website is johnkachuba.com.
You
You
beat
can
me
get
to
them
it.
that way too. So
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on.
thank you,
I
Charlotte.
appreciate it. And I would love to have you back. Okay.
Sometime.
You're
Thanks.
on my list, buddy. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. That was great. Learned a lot about shapeshifters. There were no technical glitches, so we finally got to get a good interview in. I was excited about that tonight. I want to thank you guys for coming. But what I also want to do is remind you that we are going to be doing a ghost tour, and there's more details coming up on the website at CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com. So keep an eye out for that. And I gotta lean forward here real quick. I gotta see something on my computer. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank you guys again. I want to thank you guys for coming. And if you like the show, share it with. I'm way ahead of myself. Tomorrow we're going to be on at 1 p.m. Pacific because Lynn Andrews, a shaman who from what I understand and people I've talked to, she is a top of the line shaman, and she's going to be talking about healing, doing healing work, and more, and what got her into doing her shamanic work as well. So she's going to be on with us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Okay, Pacific. So be sure to be there. I think that's it. Am I done? Yeah. Okay. So hard to remember. Senility. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're equal opportunity here. If you've been watching from YouTube tonight, there is a little ghost guy down at the right hand corner, and he has a Sherlock Holmes hat on. He also has a magnifying glass. Okay. And with that magnifying glass, that's where you click to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's more than 190 videos over there, and every kind of topic you could possibly think of. Because we've been doing this is our second year doing the show. Okay, this is our 104th episode for this season. So we've done 104 episodes in September. Pretty cool. Okay, so please subscribe because we're always looking for subscribers. Okay. Also, you can find that my paranormal team at californiahaunts.org. And again, be sure to visit the radio website at californiahauntsradio.com. You can find our videos there. This video went live, and if you have trouble finding the YouTube site, most people will Google California Haunts on YouTube, and it'll pop up for you. But if you have trouble finding it, you can do it from the website. Click on the video on the front page of the website. It'll take you over to the YouTube page, and then you can go from there. That's how you can find them. Or go up into the archives on our website. It has all the videos for this year listed there. Okay. I'm also starting to catalog our Blog Talk Radio stuff. We go back 10 to 15 years on Blog Talk Radio doing the shows. All right. For people that listen on the podcast, if you listen to iTunes or the Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio or TuneIn, we're over there too. But on Apple, especially, you're going to find not only this version of the show, but you'll find the Blog Talk version of the show as well. So all those guests are on there. So we're out there, we're around, and like if you're driving in your car and you want to get informed about shapeshifters or shadow people, this is the way to do it. Turn on the RSS feed stuff. Okay. As you can see, we got a ticker tape running at the bottom of the page. Again, we're a nonprofit organization, so everything you see here comes out of my pocket. If a computer breaks or a camera breaks or a light breaks or a mic goes down, I have to pay for it out of my pocket. And I love doing this. I love bringing shows to you guys. I love doing this. This is what I do. I'm a journalist. This is what I do. But I want to keep doing this. This is what I love to do. My producer wants to keep doing this. So if you could donate a little bit to paypal.me at California Haunts, I'd appreciate it. Or again, if you have trouble with PayPal, you're not comfortable with it, donate through Venmo. Go to Venmo and then just type in California Haunts, and we pop right up. That would be great. I would really appreciate it. The bill, my bill cycle is coming up, and I've got to pay just like everybody else. But I want to thank you guys for coming, and do check out. We even have a meetup. If you're interested in joining a meetup, Google California Haunts. We have a meetup over there, and that's where a lot of our events are advertised. But again, I want to thank you guys for coming, and I appreciate it. And I will see you tomorrow. Excuse me, at 1 p.m. Pacific. Have a good evening.